Hi folks, Rudy at Clawdon Painting Studio back again. Continuing the Box to Battlefield Hobby Basics series where I've been putting together Perry Miniatures Napoleonic French Line Infantry Battalion, the 1812 to 1815 set. Painting of that is coming to an end, so it's time to start thinking about how to do the basing for the models. And there is probably no right way and no wrong way to do this. The main things to consider are what is the frontage of each model going to be, and that is how many millimeters of footprint on the table is each model going to take. And a lot of that decision will come down to what game system you're going to be playing. Everyone is a bit different. The other decision to make is, do you want to multi-base, so have larger bases with lots of models stuck onto one base, or single base, so a smaller base with just one model on it. Different game systems will have different requirements, and even within that you can have flexibility, and instead of removing models when they are killed, you can use little markers to denote how many casualties a unit has taken. So what do you get in the box? In front of us we have the green plastic Renedra bases. The frontage, if we look at the larger rectangular bases, they are 45 millimeters by 40 millimeters. And in the Perry sets, the frontage is 15 millimeters. So you'd expect to have 1, 2, 3 models in each rank, 2 ranks on these larger rectangular bases. Or you could go for the smaller ones and have 3 models on there. They do in fact have very small ones over here, 30 millimeter and then 15 millimeter. Perhaps for a single model if you wanted to base your skirmishers, your voltigeurs, who would go out in front of the main body of troops. You might want to base them singly or in a pair. So 15 millimeter is a fairly common frontage. I personally prefer 20 millimeter. It just gives models that little bit more space. So you can get bases in MDF or other materials from different suppliers. I'm going to show some MDF bases that I've got from warbases.co.uk. And here there is a 20 millimeter by 20 millimeter square base, a 20 millimeter round base, and a 40 millimeter by 40 millimeter base. So on larger base, 4 models sitting on there. On the 2 smaller bases, just 1 model. In general, I think it's easier to have models on single bases and have them in a movement tree. So it does make your frontage slightly bigger. It's about 5 millimeters extra at each end here. It's not a big deal, and if all your opponents can agree on that, then it shouldn't matter too much when battalions get into combat with each other if it's slightly bigger or slightly smaller. The advantage of having in a movement tray is that if you're playing a game where there is casualty removal and one model dies, you can just take it out. As opposed to putting a marker, which I find just a bit fiddly, and it's a bit trickier just at a glance to tell what the relative strength of a unit is. So a movement tray, again from war bases, allows models to be carted around in a group, which speeds up the process. And that's one of the main reasons for doing multi-basing, is that instead of picking up 4 models, you can pick up 4 models on their own. You can pick up 4 models at once, and this will let you move them around. Some people do prefer one enormous base just for the unit. This is 100 millimeter by 50 millimeter, and you could stuff as many models as you like on there, and that's your unit, which could speed up gameplay if you're moving lots of units. You do get circular movement trays, sabots is what these are known as. So if you prefer models on circular or square bases, you're provided for either way. I quite like having line units on square bases and then skirmishers on circular bases. It's just a way to differentiate between the two troop types. So once you've selected your base type, how do we go about making it look less like a piece of wood or piece of plastic and more like the battlefield that the model is fighting through? So I have one of the Fusiliers I painted earlier. I've used some super glue to secure him to his base. Now what often you'll find with historical miniatures is that they come with this integral base, which raises them a millimetre or so above the rest of the base. And that can mean everyone looks like they're standing on a little mound, which is a bit awkward. The simplest way to do a base is to get some PVA glue, some craft glue, wood glue, and some sand. Put the glue on, dunk the model in, and there you go. Job's finished. That does end up, I find, showing this raised area in the middle. And we can improve on that. Honestly, I think the simplest way to do a base in one step without having to go back to it and build up different layers is to get something like Vallejo Earth Texture acrylic. And this is a paste with little bits of sand, etc. inside it. And you can spread this all over a base, and that will give you a nice textured finish that looks a lot like the earth. So I got a cocktail stick for spreading this on. Not much to it. Just going to spread this in a layer around it. So I'm doing the edges of the base first, leaving that integral base till last. I'm just trying to up the height around the sides. So it's a thicker layer around the outside. So, got a nice layer. Need to leave that for a few hours to dry though. Different model, but on this one the earth texture has dried, nice and solid. We could leave it like that, but we could improve the look of it slightly by using a darker paint. It's just watered down and put over a bit like a wash. I used Army Painter hardened carapace, which is sort of a grey-green. And we can further enhance with static grass or tufts, as I've used here. These ones come from warpainter.net. These are marsh grass 6mm tufts, and it makes it look a bit less like they're walking through a ploughed field than they are a field that's had hundreds or thousands of troops marching up and down it. This box Miniatures has 42 models in total. 6 are vultures in skirmish order, and the other 36 are designed by the Perrys to form the whole battalion. Often with wargamers, they look at what the ratio of miniatures to the real size of a battalion would be and multiply it out. Oftentimes that's either by a factor of 20, so 36 men would represent a battalion of around about 720, for example, but it also might be multiplied out by 30, so 24 men would represent a battalion of 720. And that's a decision that you need to make yourself or with your opponent to find out just how large a footprint on the table you're going to want to have. With 20mm frontage, if you have a 36-man battalion in two lines of 18, then 18 times 20 is 360mm width for your regiment, for your battalion. Or if it's a 24-man, then you're looking at 240mm. So table space needs to be a consideration for that. Another point to consider when arranging your models for basing is to align them by companies as we might have expected them to appear on the battlefield. Now, typically what that means is your grenadiers to the right of the line, so fellas with the red thistle-shaped pom-poms, and vultures in line to the left with the yellow thistle-shaped pom-poms. 12 models representing what would be the first rank, another 12 behind if we were doing a 24-man battalion here. And we would then have Fusiliers of the first company, if you want to be really specific about that, with a green pom-pom. This one in the Apocalypse, no pom-pom there. We would then have the second company. We see the officer with his blue pom-pom. Eagle Bearer is wearing a red pom-pom because he would be an important member of the battalion, possibly from the Grenadier Company carrying it. That's why the miniature is sculpted that way. Drummer and another Fusilier from the third company. This sort of peachy colour pom-pom, Aurora, I believe is the French name for it. We then have the second company, the fourth company with a violet pom-pom. And that's how you might expect to lay these out for basing. So single based, it's not too much of an issue because you can just move them around as you like. The pom-pom colours, again, not super important, but it's a nice detail if you want to add it. If you're doing multi-basing and they had 24-man unit, you'd have perhaps 6 40 by 40 bases, and you possibly want to arrange the miniatures in this fashion. And in the second rank, again, have 2 vultures, 2 from 4th company, 2 from 3rd company, 2 from 2nd company, 2 from 1st company, and 2 from the Grenadier Company. Now that arrangement by company really only applies if you're playing a bigger game with battalions on the table. I imagine most people, when they're buying their first box, are thinking more along the lines of skirmish level gaming, whether that's sharp practice, rebels and patriots, muskets and tomahawks, forager, or another smaller level game. In that case, arranging by company can be something nice to do, and perhaps there are divisions between your grenadiers, your voltigeurs, your fusiliers. But I think the strength of single basing is that if you're playing a skirmish game, you can mix up and arrange your models however you like on the battlefield. And if you have a model killed, then for casualty removal, it's much easier just to take one fella out of the movement tree. And with the movement tree, you can still move a mass at once. So I think if this is your sort of first experience with historicals, look at a skirmish game. That way you'll get to get a flavour of the period. And if it's not for you, then you've only bought 1 or 2 boxes rather than gotten right at the deep end with multiple battalions at great time and expense. The video here is probably the second last in the series. The final one will be mounting the colours, mounting the flag, and any other finishing touches we might like to do to our models. I've got a few more of these to finish painting, and basing for the vast majority to do. If you've got any comments or questions, please drop them below. If you base in a different way, if you've got different materials, or other hints and tips for other viewers, please put them below as well. Thanks for watching. I'll speak to you next time. Bye bye.